Hello guys and gals, it's Soulfax here and you're watching another episode of absolutely nothing. You're watching another War Thunder video. Yeah, welcome to my War Thunder video. Before I start saying anything, I need to say thank you all for your continuous support, and especially on the last two videos, because the amount of views and the amount of freaking likes on those videos was just freaking amazing. Thank you all for watching and thank you all for liking my videos. Also, the amount of discussion that has been started in the comment section of those videos is just amazing, and even though there's a lot of people who don't agree with my points, I just still like it. And yeah, welcome all the other subscribers that I gained through those videos. Around 40 of you have subscribed to me through those two videos, so that's really amazing. But anyhow, the reason why I'm making this video is it's kind of a disappointment, probably going to be kind of a disappointment to some of you, because the point of the last two videos that I made is to say why I'm not playing Ground Forces anymore, and after a few days of those videos being released and me not playing Ground Forces, I kind of got bored and I started playing Ground Forces again. And I know it's kind of weak-willed and going back on my word, but still, Ground Forces in War Thunder fills a niche that is very hard to find in the modern video game market. There are of course other games like World of Tanks Armored Warfare and soon to be a full-fledged tank versus tank combat in IL-2 Sturmikov. I don't know if it's Battle of Moscow or Battle of Stalingrad, it really doesn't matter, because currently there's only Panzer III Ls or Js against T-34's L11s. So basically it's not a tank versus tank game mode, it's still just Panzer IVs versus T-34s. But the point I'm trying to make is that I got bored and I really do love playing this game, so I decided to give it another go, like to see if anything can change my mind. And because I haven't played it in such a long while, the update 1.57 came out, or 1.59, no, 1.57, excuse me. There were a lot of new things added into that, and of course I count in the British tank tree as a part of 1.7. And I started playing the Brits, and oh my freaking god, they're so much fun. I don't know what's more fun, playing the Crusaders with the Crusader Mark III with that 57mm cannon is so freaking awesome, or the Cromwells. The Cromwell 5 and the Cromwell 1 must be the two best tanks that I've ever played in War Thunder Ground Forces. When you consider everything about those tanks, they just suit my playstyle perfectly and completely, to the point that I gotta say those are my two favorite tanks in the game, and I can't decide between those two. They are one tank. The Cromwell is my most favorite tank in Ground Forces War Thunder so far. But there's been a lot of things that happened in War Thunder Ground Forces and in War Thunder in general since I stopped playing them and since I uploaded my last video. So let's talk about a few things right now. I can't start talking about 1.57 without mentioning my most favorite addition to this update, and it's got to be the Dicker Max. I still haven't unlocked this tank, but when I played against it, it seems like such a fun tank to play, because firstly it has 15 degrees of gun depression. That is borderline British for gun depression. It has got a 105mm long barrel gun with an amazing amount of high explosive filler, which means that it will one-shot everything that it sees all the time. And even though the armor and the mobility is not very good, but just think of this thing as a gun on wheels, because that's basically it. Has no armor, it's not very mobile, you just gotta find a nice spot, use the gun depression and just one-shot everything that you see. But that's not the biggest thing that happened in 1.57. Other than the multitude of vehicles that we received, a few basic things in the game have changed. So firstly, let's talk about the changes to the APHE ammo and to how the ammo racks work, to their quote-unquote health, and to the way that those two things interact. Around the time that 1.57 released, Gaijin decided to revamp the way that APHE ammo, when it penetrates and detonates inside of a vehicle, interacts with the ammo racks and the fuel tanks. So basically what they did is they increased the explosive power of APHE, but they also at the same time increased the health of both the ammo racks and the fuel tanks in each tank. Which means that when you hit an ammo rack now, even though it has more health, the high explosive filler in the APHE shell that you're firing at the ammo rack has more explosive power, which means that again, most of the time that you score a direct hit to a ammo rack with an APHE shell from, let's say, a T-34 or a Panzer IV, you're most likely going to detonate that ammo rack. And that wouldn't be such a bigger problem in on itself, even though it kind of fucks over the other two nations, the British and the Americans, because, well, on the British side, Not a single tank that I've played so far, and I've almost reached tier 3, has an APHE round. It's only and exclusively AP rounds of some degree. And on the American side, you do have APHE rounds, but they have substantially less penetration than the AP rounds that they usually fire. Now, that would have been, again, such a big deal because you can play around it. Even though you don't have such a big chance of detonating the ammo racks, you have a big chance of setting the tank on fire. I don't know why, but the AP rounds that the British tanks fire just set everything on fire. If you hit the tank anywhere close to the engine, you're definitely gonna start a fire, which is a very good thing in my opinion, because of the next thing that we're gonna talk about, you really need to put a lot of shots into an enemy tank with the British tank to actually take him out. Now, the second big thing that happened is something that a lot of people have been talking about recently and debating about, and it's the inclusion of a very peculiar system in War Thunder Ground Forces. And yes, I'm talking about Last Man Standing. Previous to the addition of Last Man Standing, each tank in the game had a requirement of minimum 2 alive crew members to actually operate the tank. One sitting in the driver's seat and the other one occupying the gunner/loader seat position, whatever you want to call it. But after they added Last Man Standing, well, the whole feature speaks for itself. Now, if you have one crew member remaining, that crew member can still operate the whole tank by himself. Now, how, you ask? Well, basically, it's logical. The crew member either sits at the driver's seat and drives the tank without being able to operate the turret. The turret locks in place with the last place that you actually looked with the turret. And then when you want to actually fire the turret, the driver or the last crew member remaining evacuates the driver's seats and then just sits in the turret and tries to aim the turret and fire at the enemies. Now, naturally, since you have only one crew member remaining, when the crew member is stationed in the turret, he cannot drive the tank, and the crew member is driving the tank, he cannot shoot the tank. There is a cooldown period between each action, so when you order the crew member to leave one station and go to the other station, there is at least a 5 seconds cooldown between each of those things. Now, that in on itself, the whole feature, is not a big problem. The way it's implemented and the way it works in the game in the current meta is the problem. But in all honesty, I think this is one of the least needed additions to the game, because the only thing, in my opinion, that it does, and the only thing that Gaijin thinks it was supposed to do, is to prolong the life, to increase the survivability of some vehicles. Well, not some vehicles, some more than other, but most vehicles in the game, and that is a very lazy way to do things. And honestly, I don't see who this feature was catered to. Was there a vocal minority that I've completely managed to miss? I was complaining about getting constantly one-shotted and wanted to have some way to survive after getting frontally penetrated. Well, I mean, there is a vocal minority that is complaining about getting one-shotted, and that is those people who I used to be one of, that complain that T-34s are overpowered and that the ammo is just basically nuclear bombs that are being thrown at your tank. And that is, if you think about it, if you just assume that this feature, the Last Man Standing feature, was brought in to counter those arguments and to counter those complaints, it's kind of weird. So firstly, they decided to buff the amount of damage APHE does after it penetrates, meaning that in the current meta, if you manage to score a direct hit on an ammo rack with an APHE round, you're most likely going to detonate that ammo rack, instantly killing your enemy. And then they add the Last Man Standing feature, where you need to kill all 5 crew members individually to actually, well, 5 crew members, assuming that the tank that you're firing has 5 crew members. You need to kill all the 5 crew members individually before you can actually disable that tank permanently. And that is just completely nonsensical. What kind of stupid balance is this? And what kind of poor, lame foresight is it? Because when you add those two things together, you're effectively neutering almost one whole nation worth of tanks and a half of the other nation. And I'm talking about the British and about the US. Now, I've been playing a lot of British tanks. I've only played the German tanks and the Russian tanks a few times since I've come back to War Thunder Ground Forces, and the worst thing about British tanks are definitely the cannons and the ammunition they use. Now, prior to the release of 1.57, because of the uproar that was caused by some part of the community, and because the Gaijin felt that the APDC rounds were kind of overpowered, and they were, they decided to nerf them, and in normal Gaijin fashion, they nerfed them all the way to oblivion, where they were basically useless. Now, they managed to unnerf this with the release of 1.57 to where the point the APDC rounds are basically useful again, but with nerfing the APD3 rounds prior to 1.57, they also nerfed the standard AP rounds. Their penetration was remained unchanged, but their post-penetration effect, the way they fragment and the amount of fragmentation they do and the amount of damage those fragments do has been nerfed, but that has not been unnerfed. And now all the British tanks, before the tanks that you get the 76.2mm cannons on, are basically just so hard to play because you need to individually snipe. You need to fucking individually snipe with a 75mm cannon individual crew members, because of the fact that you need to kill all 5 crew members. And when you factor in the fact that it's very hard to detonate an ammo rack with a non-AP-HE round, you get a situation where the first few British tanks are extremely hard to use if you don't know where to aim. This is not something that affects only the Brits and the Americans, this effectively affects all the nations in the game. Now I'm just gonna throw out a few examples in no particular order. So firstly, all of the early Russian tanks have only 4 crew members, meaning that their survivability, like the survivability of the British tanks that like the Matilda, the Crusader and the Valentine that only have 3 crew members, is going to be slightly lower than the survivability in the new system of the other German and American tanks that have 5 crew members. Secondly, let's take just the Panther for an example. So the Panther has a very good frontal upper plate that is very hard to penetrate for the Americans and for the Germans, for the Russians at that battle rating. Only the Brits, I think, have the capability to reliably penetrate the frontal upper plate of a Panther with the 76mm 16-pounder cannon. Not really sure on that. But the point I'm trying to make is if the Panther protects his lower glacis and if it just exposes its turret, meaning that the enemy needs to shoot at its upper front plate to actually kill the last player, the last crew member that is the driver, they're gonna have a very bad time, and that brings a stalemate in the game that wasn't previously there and that is now there after they added this nonsensical, just completely unnecessary feature. Also, due to the buff to the AP-HE ammo, some self-propelled anti-aircraft guns that are being used commonly as tank destroyers like the Whirlwind, like the ZSUs, like the Ostwind, are extremely and incredibly powerful now because every shot that they fire has a chance to strike a ammo rack, and every shot that strikes an ammo rack has a very large chance of actually detonating that ammo rack and instantly killing the crew and disabling the vehicle. Yeah, I'm sorry my passion got the best of me over there and I started ranting a little bit, but on a more calmer note, in all honesty, I think that the last man standing feature brings absolutely nothing to the game other than another nuisance for the players that they need to overcome. It's easy to adapt to something like the nerfs to the AP rounds and to the buffs to the AP-HE rounds and how they interact with each other, but it's very hard to actually adapt to something that I think, in my opinion, is completely unnecessary to the game and brings nothing other than increased frustration. When you look at last man standing from a competitive standpoint, things just don't add up. In the game, when you have a tank that has a full crew fighting against a tank that has only 2 crew members remaining, the tank with the only 2 crew members remaining is at a serious disadvantage because of the fact that he will drive slower, his tank will turn slower, his guns will reload slower, and his turret will turn around slower. Now, with the last man standing feature, they expect us to actually somehow fight with only 1 crew member remaining while deciding, is it time to drive my tank or is it time to wait 10 seconds and switch to my cannons so I can actually shoot at the enemy. In my opinion, the last man standing feature can actually bring something to the table, but only with very experienced and very good players and in only very specific circumstances, where the person who is shooting at you, who killed your other 4 crew members if you're in a Panzer IV, is already dead and you can actually get the hell away from there. But in normal play, in everyday circumstances, the last man standing feature is nothing but an opportunity to survive a few more shots and to annoy your enemy a little bit before you die. In my everyday play, when I get the last man standing feature activated and when I only have 1 crew member remaining, depending on the circumstances, around 50 to 60% of the times, I just J out because it really isn't practical and it's very annoying to play like that. Bottom line is, last man standing, if it were to disappear tomorrow and not be a part of the game, I wouldn't mind. I would actually be pretty happy because then things would go back to how they used to be and the game would actually make sense to me. But yeah, there was a few things more that I wanted to discuss in this video, but I just can't remember about them. Maybe about the bushes or stuff like that. The bushes are just a weird example of how Gaijin isn't very consistent, very internally consistent. I learned a new word, internally consistent, And I mean, when you say that a thing is at a discount, you need to actively advertise it as a discount. And let's not even talk about the fact that the bushes were advertised as an enhanced camouflage for the players. And then they just despawn after a few hundred meters from the tank. Even 100 meters, the tanks are definitely more see-through, more opaque than they used to be. So basically the bushes, they came out a few days after the bushes were released and said that the bushes are, that they are working as intended, they're just a cosmetic feature while advertising them as a camouflage feature. Now, to me, that sounds like they're trying to cover their ass and trying to salvage what they want, because there was a huge huge blowback, a huge drama in the community that occurred because of these bushes, because, well, people saw them as a pay-to-win feature because they were behind a paywall that is not in Silver Lions, and they decided to capitalize, and by they I mean Gaijin, on the opportunity where they saw that they can just cover their asses by saying they're working as intended. They were never supposed to be a camouflage feature that gives the players some advantage. Now, to me, that is just completely bonkers, and I don't know what's going on in Gaijin and in their management. The PR squad is very weird because they just did this thing called Russian bias, executive Russian bias director or something along those lines, which is, I mean, they are turning it into a joke, which is a good thing because, I mean, it's better to laugh about something than cry about something. But again, I'm ranting and blurring on about things that absolutely make no sense in this video and have no correlation to me or anything, because I don't play this game with a premium account, I don't spend golden eagles, and I just practically don't freaking care about that stuff. But anyhow, after I've ramped on for long enough, my name has been Soulfax. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope you will stay on my channel. Like, subscribe, and comment. I just don't like saying that, but anyhow, again, my name has been Soulfax. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.